right, everybody. Welcome to the FCA Locker Room, the show where we explore how faith and sports come together to transform lives on and off the field. I'm one of your hosts, Vincenzo Pepe, and today we are going to talk about huddles. I know we've talked about them in the past and kind of what they look like, but we're going to dedicate this episode specifically to huddles, right? So if you've ever wondered how to disciple others, especially in sports, but didn't know where to start or what that looks like, this is the episode for you. Um, and I think most listeners, hopefully, you'll be encouraged and maybe you might want to get involved or start a huddle. Or maybe this is an episode that you can share with somebody. Maybe you've been having conversations with an athlete or a coach or somebody in the sports realm. And they've had a passion or desire to, reach more people with the gospel in their circle of influence. Hopefully, we start off by being able to just give you a little nudge in that direction and really what it looks like, because this is truthfully the huddle is the bread and butter, the lifeblood of the FCA ministry. It's where so much life change happens, so much heart change happens, one-on-one discipleship and evangel. It's incredible, and when you witness it and you're part of one, there's truly nothing like that. And I know people are gonna say, "Oh, you're biased because you're FCA and that's what you do." Maybe, but it's an incredible thing when you experience it. So that's what we're gonna dive into today. I know the last couple episodes that we've done we're a little bit more on the staff side, right? It was me and some of our other FCA staff talking about what staffing opportunities look like. How does the FCA ministry run with staff, right? Like we need the staff to run the ministry, and so we talked a lot about with Steve Heinz the talent advancement piece of what it looks like to come on staff, and who are the people that we're looking to bring on staff, and the need for the Northeast region. I spoke a little bit more about the practical things about like breaking down some of the myths that people think that they can't go into ministry or why they shouldn't go into ministry. And I shared a little bit of my story. And then the last one that you heard me do was with our newest hire, Michael Toro, down in Westchester County, just about calling and trying to lean into that and really being obedient to God's calling when He calls on us. So today we're going to take a step out of that little mini series that we did, kind of get back on track of just the sports environment and using that as discipleship. And so I thought a really good segue from the staff piece of things would be the huddle piece, right? Staff lead huddles, they start huddles, they engage with huddles. But as you're going to find out today, it's not always our staff that typically lead the huddles. We have huddle leaders, we have volunteers, we have character coaches. So we'll talk a little bit about that today. But I really thought it was a neat transition because why do we need staff? This is a great reason why. Right here is our huddles. Um, so just let me just get to the nuts and bolts real quick, and then we'll get into some more stories and some more details. But just what is a huddle, right? We talk about that all the time at FCA. If you've ever been to an FCA event or have looked at our website or have seen some of our social media, see this huddle here, this huddle on this campus, is a huddle on this campus, is a huddle at this community. Sometimes you're like, what is a huddle? It's a small group Bible study for coaches or athletes, and it takes place in a sports context, right? So it's a small group, right? It's a Bible study. We use the term huddle because it's a sports term. We're usually dealing with coaches and or athletes, so it makes sense, right? There's different types of huddles. There's coaches huddles that where it's self-explanatory. It's just coaches get together and dive into the word and encourage each other. There's athlete huddles, and those can vary. There could be team-specific huddles. So maybe it's at your high school or college, and like just the football team is meeting together, or just the softball team is meeting together. Um, there's multi-sport huddles where obviously people, boys and girls from different sports all coming together. It's not just that one specific team. We have campus huddles, which again, probably the majority of what you would see across, the United States with our huddles is probably campus huddles, where they're happening on middle school, high school, college campuses. Most of them, if not all of them, are usually an official school club, and then community huddles where maybe we don't meet on campus just yet for whatever reason, and I'll explain that in a minute. But sometimes it's meeting at somebody's house or somebody's church or a Dunkin' Donuts or whatever it might be. Especially in the early stages, we see that a lot. But sometimes it's just because the community huddle is because there's a group of kids that want to get together and maybe they don't all go to the same school, or they're not all on the same team, but they're just friends and they live in the same area, and so they get together and do a huddle like that. Another reason for a community huddle might be, there's some hoops to jump through and a could be a long process to become an actual club on a campus somewhere. And so, um, and there's also some restrictions, right? So when we do have uh, clubs on campus, sometimes our staff don't have full access to it, so they can't go every week or they can't be there the whole time or whatever the case might be. Um, so sometimes I personally really like when we start off as a community huddle. It gives our staff and our volunteers a lot more access to be able to be there and kind of walk with these athletes or these coaches. Typically, the athletes is what we're talking about in this one, but being able to walk with them and kind of model what a huddle looks like and just kind of be there to kind of guide them. And then once we feel like those huddle leaders are truly ready to be on their own in a degree. We're always there supporting and helping and being there for resources and things like that. But once they're kind of ready to really lead on their own and take that step, they kind of launch into a campus huddle. Um, it's not a church service, right? It's a space to build relationships, to grow in faith, and to create gospel impact for people to hear the word of Jesus, of the word of God. Um, I think it's a really neat opportunity, even for Christian athletes, because so many times they might not just go to a typical Bible study, right? If you just call it X school Bible study or whatever it might be, um, sometimes you're not going to get people that are going to come to that, especially non-believers. However, if you frame it that it's a huddle and it's geared towards athletes and it has a sport component to it, now it's a little bit more appealing to somebody, right? It's a little bit more appealing to that Christian athlete who's like, okay, this is a little bit more up my alley. Or that non-believer who is an athlete says, you know what, I love sports and like my friends are going to this. It's something that has to do with sports, so I know I'll relate to it a little bit. It's a great way to do that. And in our huddles, we do a lot of things, and I'll walk you through what maybe a typical huddle would look like. But it's fun, it's engaging. It's not just, hey, get here and just like put your head into the Bible. Like we have conversations, there's questions, there's fun, there's activities, there's group projects, there's all these different things that it can be. Um, and one of my favorite stories of a huddle is um, probably one of the first huddles that we really got started on a campus. Um, but for a full year we started off campus, and it was for a high school huddle. It was multi-sport, um, and we met in somebody's originally we were going to meet at somebody's house, but we ended up getting too many people too quickly, so they actually had a barn in their backyard that was outfitted. It had couches and lights and tables and all. It was a really cool space, and so we utilized that for an entire year to run this huddle, which was really unique, really awesome. We had about upwards of 35 kids usually showed up every week, um, but it was just really cool to see like these kids were coming before school even started. They were coming to someone's house to dive into the word, to pray together, to be together, right? And then they would go off and go to school. But they were being intentional about being there. They didn't just show up to school a few minutes early, like they went out of their way to go somewhere off campus at 6:30 in the morning, to then get to where they needed to be, right? So we met for about a half hour, 40 minutes, and then they would, go to school. The person lived pretty close to school. But it was just so neat. Like for me, it was so humbling. Like, oh my gosh, 30 high school students and some middle school students were coming out to this early in the morning. Like that just shows that they were hungry for it. They wanted it. And it was just really cool to see how that leader that year just really created a good foundation for them, and then was able to hand it off to a leader the next year and then the next year. And now, we just finished up our third year there at that school. They're officially on campus and everything, but it literally started with just a handful of kids, probably about 15 kids, and grew to 35 rather quickly. It was just really neat to see that, and it was awesome for me. It just filled me up so much, and I loved going there. And we got a little creative halfway through the year. Instead of just meeting as a big group every week, we did it where we met as a big group, and then the next week just the guys met, and then the following week big group, and then the following week just the girls met. So we kind of alternated in that way to build a little more community, get a little bit more intentional about some of the conversations that we were having. It was really neat. So now you have an idea of kind of just why a huddle, right? Like what is a huddle, the point of it, but like why huddles? Why do huddles matter? Why are they so important to our ministry? Um, if you look at what discipleship is, right, you could probably put two words together and it would probably give you a really good definition, right? It's relationship and consistency. If you're able to do that, discipleship happens very naturally and very easily, right? You need to build that relationship. You need to build trust with people. You need to build that camaraderie, that understanding where, you can kind of speak into people's lives and people can kind of speak into your life and things like that. But it also needs to be consistent. If you're doing it once a month and if that, right, and it's like hit or miss, and you get some people that come and some people that don't, or it's on a different time or a different day, that's really tough, right? But when you can say like, hey, every Monday we're going to meet, or every other Monday at 7 o'clock we're going to meet, and we're going to dive into this, like those are the things where people know what to expect. They know who's going to be there. It's consistent. They know every time like they're going to be able to come in and what to expect. And that's what a huddle provides. It provides both of those. It provides the relationship piece and it provides that consistency that we so often need, right? And it just really, all these athletes are coming together because with that commonality of sport, right? They know what it means to win and lose. They know what it means to go through conditioning week. They know what it means, for to have an early morning Saturday practice after a rough loss, and coaches having them do suicides up and down the field or whatever it might be. Like they all know that whatever sport they're in doesn't really matter. So that's the commonality that brings them together. And you can have conversations on that. And then we're opening up the word. Then we're praying together. Then we're doing projects together. So that's why it's important because it's just bringing these coaches or these athletes together. Um, you know, Matthew 28 tells us the Great Commission, right? Go and make disciples of all nations. And this is a perfect example of that. I mean, that's in many ways like a theme verse for FCA. But it's the truth is like go and make disciples of all nations, and it's we're going to the fields like these young athletes or these coaches in these communities and these schools, like they're able to do that, right? They're able to go and make disciples, and sometimes it's our staff working alongside some of these leaders, but almost every huddle has a huddle leader, has a student or a coach that initiated that, right? And our staff come along and maybe our staff run it for a little while until they hand it off to that leader when it's the appropriate time. But it's just awesome to really see that, right? And so another great example of that is at one of our colleges we started, and at first it was I was leading it every week, right? We had an athlete leader who wanted to help, who really helped us get it started on campus and really initiate the whole thing, but I was really leading it basically every week. Then we went to me leading every other week. Then we went to me not even being there every week, right? And then we were able to this past year really officially hand it off to him, and he was really leading it every single week. And then we did tie in a character coach for him, somebody that he could speak to outside of myself, that just on a regular basis of just checking in like, hey, how are you doing, what's going on with the huddle, what do you need help with, how are you doing personally with your walk. And then that person did end up attending a lot of the huddles as well, but it was a really cool transition just from I was able to model it and kind of support and equip this athlete, and then they were ready to take it over, and we empower them to then go do it and be able to run it on his own, with the support of, like I said, another volunteer and some of um, uh, his other athletes and things like that at his school. Um, I mentioned before the different types of huddles. So, in a perfect world for me, what I would love to see at our campuses specifically is maybe once a week. So, say it is Mondays or Tuesday mornings, we have a multi-sport huddle where everyone from all sports, guys and girls, are all getting together and they're diving into something. And then later on in the week, you get together with your specific team, right? So everyone gets together on Monday night. We talk about whatever, what maybe it's in a series of things or one of the resources that we're going through, whatever that topic is. And then throughout the week, if I'm on the baseball team or the basketball team or the field hockey team, whatever it is, I can then go with my team. It's probably going to be a much smaller group, maybe just three, four, five, um, instead of 30. I can get together with those people that are on my team who I probably have a little bit of a stronger bond with, and we can go a little bit deeper, right? We can look at other resources. We can dive into that topic more. We can talk about it a little bit more with each other. And so I think that would be a very, like I said, in a perfect world, that's how it would operate. And we do have that at some of our schools. Some of the teams have a lot more people that are involved, so it's a little bit easier for them. Some of them they might only be the only one from their team coming, so obviously they're not going to do that. But sometimes they latch on with other teams, and that's just really cool because especially that team specific one, they're really leading that out on their own. Maybe there's somebody that kind of takes ownership, if you will, accountability, and kind of like facilitates it. But those are when the athletes are really taking it on their own. Um, so I'm just gonna run through like what a typical huddle would look like, right? So you're hearing this, you're like, okay, it's a Bible study, but he's saying there's some fun and they're saying there's life change that can happen. Like, so just to give you a typical example, and this is not like a be all end all. This is not perfect, right? This is not what every single huddle looks like, but this is a typical huddle. Is I really at minimum want them to meet bi-weekly every other week, just because if you go longer than that, it's tough. You don't meet each other as much. If you have to skip a week because there's break or something else is going on or there's another event happening, it's really tough to then reschedule. So at minimum, I try to have our huddles meet every other week, if not weekly. Weekly is obviously ideal when we can do it. And some of the huddles, like our high school huddle meets before school, so they meet for about a half hour. Our college huddle meets in the evening, and they have a little bit more time, so they meet for about an hour. Sometimes it, lasts a little bit longer, just based on the topic and some of the discussion, but about an hour. And so typically, what we do is in the very beginning, we open up in prayer. Um, and then we do some sort of activity. So, even if it's just a quick 5 minute icebreaker game, just getting everyone moving around, having a little bit of fun. They're athletes, right? So we want to do some sort of competition. Maybe we have a prize for them, even if it's just like a water bottle or maybe like a $5 Dunkin' card, whatever it might be. Just something to kind of get them going and kind of loosen everybody up and, kind of just eases some tension, eases some people if they feel a little uncomfortable. They're doing things that make it fun. And then we get into the message or the study using different resources, right? And so I'll get to those in a minute. But whatever we're diving into scripture, we'll go over questions. Maybe we'll break into smaller groups, or it might just be one big group discussion. This is why it's always important to make sure that our staff or volunteer kind of either modeled it in the beginning or continue to even be there, even if they're not leading it, is because we want to be able to help guide if things get off track a little bit or if there are questions that pop up. And so sometimes an athlete might ask a question and the huddle leader might not have the answer. We want to be able to help them with that. And we also kind of train our huddle leaders like, hey, if you don't know or if somebody doesn't know, even if we're not accessible right then and there, reach out to us and then we'll be able to get you the answer. And maybe you can, continue that conversation the next week or whatever it might be. Um, so some of the resources that we have athlete Bibles, which for pretty much for every huddle, every athlete in that huddle will get an athlete Bible. They're incredible. It's our coolest resource that we have. So in the front, there's like life topics, right? And so it might be relationships, it might be school, it could be anything like that, and stress, right? Whatever it might be. And then it tells you maybe one or two passages to turn to that relate to that. And then in that text, there's a little box, right? So whatever page it is, let's say you turn to the book of Matthew, whatever chapter and verse it is, there's a little box and it lists some extra questions, right? So you read that part of scripture and then there's questions that go to it. There's sport topics also, so it's like training, wins, losses, being good teammates, whatever it is, same thing. So it's really a plug and play thing. You find out what topic you want to do. You can go there, you can read that text, you can read the questions verbatim. You don't have to really come up with your own. I always tell our huddle leaders, obviously read ahead, maybe make some of your own notes or come up with different questions, but figure out how to facilitate that. But it's easy for them. They don't have to worry about creating a curriculum or creating resources or coming up with things on their own. Now, some of them do. They've come to me and said, "Hey, Vincenzo, I'd really like to do this topic, or I'd really like for us to talk about this." And sure, maybe we can create something based on that if there's not something already made for it. So the athlete Bible, and even in the back, there's a bunch of reading plans that they can just turn to. We have handbooks, which are very similar. They have about 31 devotions in there. Again, it starts with a prayer, there's scripture, there's a short story, and then some questions, and then some things that maybe they can do later on in the week. We have something called the core, which are 8 essentials to building a strong faith. And so they kind of walk through that. And again, that can be an 8 week study, right? That's 2 months of work and curriculum and resources that they can just really read through and go through. And so there's so many more. There's E3 Bibles. There's websites, there's videos, there's sports specific devotion. So there's all these different things that we supply our huddle leaders with. And then they get to choose like, hey, I think our group would really enjoy this, or, that's not really what we're ready for. I don't think that's really going to resonate with some people. So we're going to do it this way instead. And sometimes they just pull up their phone and go on the YouVersion app and type in FCA under the reading plans. and they have hundreds to choose from, right? And sometimes those are really good for the team huddles that meet later on in the week because you can click on them, you can add people to join, and you can write notes in there with each other, and you can kind of see where each other are progressing through it. So those are always really neat to be able to do it that way. Um, but again, it's the relational nature of these huddles. It's not just about teaching, right? It's about community. So we don't necessarily just want whoever's leading that huddle. Let's say it's me for that day. I don't want to just go in there and just sit like read a couple verses and then explain all of it. Like I want to ask questions. I want feedback. I want to hear what some of the other people are thinking. And then yes, it's part of my responsibility to facilitate us and answer certain questions and point us in the right direction. But it's not a sermon, right? We don't want to do that. We want to get these athletes or these coaches involved in it and right really hear from them and some of their thoughts and questions, concerns, things that they might be unsure of. Um, so again, like with the coaches huddles, those are really unique also because a lot of times it's coaches from different schools. So they get together and they'll talk shop a little bit, of course, which is something that we love to do. And then we're able to talk about it like how can we use this in our own life, but then how can we also use this to um, in our platform as a coach to share our faith, to do these things. And we have resources for them to be able to, they have coaches' Bibles that are very similar to athlete Bibles. They have coaches' handbooks, there's coaches' devotions. And some of it is specific to them and what they can be doing in their own personal life. And then some of it is how can they be doing this with their athletes. And that's where, with the coaches' huddles, we really see the true transformation of they're being there, they're being invested in, they're understanding, they're absorbing a lot of this information and knowledge and understanding, and then they're being able to go out and go do it, right? And that's where Matthew 28 comes in. That's going and making disciples who make disciples. So who can lead a huddle? You heard me talk about huddle leaders, right? And so how do we find those huddle leaders? Who do we know who they are? Typically, a lot of times, if it's a huddle that's just starting out, a lot of times it's an athlete that we've connected with some way, or they've reached out to us and say, "Hey, I saw a little bit about FCA. I'd love to get this started at my school." Great. Hey, let's have some conversations. Let's get to know each other. Let's get to see where you're at spiritually. Some athletes I've met are super far along and very mature believers, sometimes more than a lot of adults that I come across, right? And that's like awesome, incredible. Some of them not so much, right? They might be a little bit newer in their walk with Jesus, and that's okay. And we still want them to be leaders, right? But sometimes that just means like we might need to walk with them a little bit more. There might need to be more conversations. There might need to be a little bit more training prior to them really taking on this huddle. But that's typically how we find them. And then, if that's the brand new huddle, right? Then the next year we look to see, all right, if they're graduating, if that person's graduating, well, then maybe in the springtime, we're gonna ask, hey, who's interested in leading next year to continue this? And we might have a couple applicants. Again, we go through the same process with them. There is an application for them to fill out to be a huddle leader. We go through some of the questions with them. We talk to them about their responses, and then we lay out like, hey, here's the responsibilities, here's the duties, here's what you can expect. Here's what's expected of you, and then we kind of move along in that process. But there's a lot of question marks sometimes. I get a lot of, I don't think I can do this because, right? All these maybe myths, if you will, that come up with leading a huddle. So sometimes I hear, I'm not a pastor. Like, how am I supposed to do that? Like, that's a pastor's job. Or, well, I'm not going to have all the answers. I didn't get a seminary degree. Like, I'm not doing, right? At the end of the day, all that stuff, does it help? Of course, it would help, right? If you had formal training and things like this, right? And sometimes adults are saying that to me. But then on the flip side, we're having a 14, 15-year-old lead a Bible study in his classroom because he's just being obedient to God and he doesn't have all the answers, but he's doing the prep work and he's allowing FCA to help him help his classmates and his teammates, right? So you just need a love for Jesus, a desire to disciple others, and a willingness to step out in faith and just be obedient to what God's calling you to do. If He's calling you to do that, right, He's going to qualify you. The Holy Spirit is going to come upon you and be able to help you do those things. And that's what we do. That's what FCA does. That's our responsibility is to help your knowledge and your heart and your understanding of things, but then also provide you with a way to be successful, right? A way to lead in a way that you're best going to lead. And that's why even prior to a huddle, there's so much interaction that we do with our huddle leaders. There's so many conversations and relationship building because we want to know them best, right? So that we can figure out how to serve them so that they can serve the other team. So, you know, again, you don't need all this background and all this knowledge and all this education or anything like that. If you don't know where to start, heck, that's like I said, turn to the front of the athlete Bible, figure out a topic that you want to talk about, and turn to that page, and then there you go. You're halfway through completing your first huddle. So it is easy. I'm not going to say, oh, I shouldn't say it's easy, right? But it's very doable, right? You just have to be willing to go do it and be a little uncomfortable in the beginning. It's going to be uncomfortable in the beginning, but that's okay. Be authentic when you're with your huddle. They're probably a little awkward in the beginning too. They might not really know what to do or how to act or what to expect. But as they grow throughout the school year, now these kids are becoming great friends or becoming people that they can rely on each other for. Um, so if you have these doubts that I can't do this, I don't know how to do that, just remember there are people that were probably even less qualified than you that are leading huddles because if they have that desire to do it, we can help get them there, right? And again, it's not for some people, it's a faster track, other people, it's a slower walk, and that's okay. Whatever, where we will meet you wherever you're at, right? And with God's guidance, we're going to help you fit the role that you need to fit in order to do this. If this is truly what you want to do at your school, at your community, with your team, whatever it might be. Excuse me. So, how do you start a huddle? Maybe you've been listening to this and be like, okay, I think I can do this. This is something I'm interested in just at least pursuing and finding it out if it's something that I can do or want to do. And you want some more information. Well, number one, I would say reach out to your local FCA staff person, wherever you're listening. If you're in the Hudson Valley area, it's me. If it's somewhere in New York, go on our websites, whatever it might be. If you know that person, if you don't, just go on FCA and you can select find staff, and it'll show your closest staff person based on your zip code. I would say start with that, right? You want to have a conversation with somebody, get connected. You can also, it's a newer website, but it's something that I think is really helpful for Huddle specifically. If you go to fcahuddles.org, and I'll put that link in our description also, but if you go to fcahuddles.org, there's a lot of information on there. What a huddle is, some of the resources that you can use, how to start a huddle. There's an application, or an interest form that you can fill out that will then go to your local staff person that, you can have a conversation. So it's really neat. But just walk through some of these simple steps of taking that initiative. And like I said, if nothing else, you're not committing to anything, but find out some information about it. See if this is something where you do feel God is leading you to do, right? Obviously, start with prayer. Um, about where you want to do it, how you want to do it, with who you want to do it, if it's something that you should be doing. It all needs to be bathed in prayer first, right? Like I said, reach out to our FCA staff person. Use the tools and resources that we have for you. Take advantage of those things. We come with 70 plus years of history and information and resources and tools to be able to use, right, for these exact reasons. Um, and then once you're at that point where you want to start a huddle, then we support you. Like, hey, who are maybe two or three people that you might know that want to help support you? They might not want to lead, but they're going to be there for you and they want to help get this going, right? All right, let's talk to those people, right? Let's figure out, hey, what day do you think we should meet? Should we meet before school, after school, in the middle of the day? Sometimes it depends, by school they allow clubs to meet only at certain times, but if not, what works best? Start talking to some people about what do you think, right? And that's where when I kind of walked us through a huddle, what a typical huddle looks like, I said it's not an all-encompassing blueprint, it's just a plan. Because at the end of the day, a huddle can be many different things. It can be a little bit more formal and you meet in a classroom, or it can be something where you guys are meeting on the bus, right, on your way to a game, or at a hotel when you're doing an away tournament, or it can be at the football field in the bleachers, wherever you want it to be, but it also can be whatever you want it to be because you know your classmates, your athletes, your teammates better than I do, or better than the other FCA staff does. So we want to hear from you. What are you guys looking for? What do you think is going to resonate best with those people? And then what can we plug in? How can we do it? um, so again, just some fears. So we talked about like some of the myths, but some of the fears and misconceptions of, and I have great stories for some of these, right? Well, what if nobody shows up? I don't even know if there's, I don't know if anyone else would want to come to this other than me and my friends. So that's pretty much exactly what our Marist College huddle leader said when we started. He's like, I don't even know. He's like, I'm sure there's Christian athletes. He's like, I just don't know who else they are. He's like, so I don't know how many people are going to show up. We did the first week, um, and there was 15 or 16 people. By 3 or 4 weeks in, we had a full group of about 30 athletes showing up every week. So there was a lot of those people out there, right? They just didn't know about it, and maybe they weren't always outward about their faith because they didn't feel comfortable to do it. But if you put this out there, there's people that are looking for it and people that will come. They just maybe they weren't the right person to step up and lead, or maybe they weren't the right person to initiate it, right? So there's people out there, and God, and something that I've had to find comfort in with all of our events with FCA, because sometimes we don't get as many people as we would have hoped, or whatever the case may be. I have faith that whoever God wants to be there and needs to be there is going to be there. If there's been times where I thought we were going to get 35 kids at Huddle and we got four, well, I've had better conversation and we got deeper and further and quicker with four athletes or four coaches, right, than I would have been able to get if we had, 40 or 50 kids that showed up. So don't worry about the numbers. God is going to take care of that, and the right amount of people and the right person is going to be there, whoever needs to be there. People say, "Well, I'm not qualified." We kind of already talked about that. Like God doesn't call the qualified; He qualifies the called, right? And again, we're there to help qualify you to agree and help you, and there's a lot of things that FCA does to support you and protect you as well. Um, but you guys will be equipped. You'll be supported by your local FCA team, and not just us, right? Not just or your local team, but an entire global ministry that is praying for you and there and has your back to do all these things and is praying for you to step out. So if you're feeling led to this, if you're feeling called to it, if you're feeling that you can't do it, I promise you, you can. I've seen it time and time again with athlete after athlete and coach after coach to really do this. So I want to wrap up here in the next couple minutes, but again, go to that website. It's in the description, fcahuddles.org. Uh, find out a little bit more about it, right? Reach out to us. You can DM us on our social medias. You can go on our websites, email us, whatever it might be. We'd love to hear that, right? But if God is stirring your heart right now, don't ignore it, right? Don't ignore it. There's athletes and coaches that need exactly what you are also looking for and what you can offer. So huddle up, get in the game, get it going at your school, at your church, at your community, whatever it is, because truly there's nothing like athletes coming together in community. Again, there's already that camaraderie, there's that bond that brings you all together of sport, and now you're diving into scripture, you're praying with each other, you're supporting each other at your games, you're supporting each other, in life. You're building a group of people to really help grow your faith and for them to also grow their faith. So if this is something that you're interested in, I hope maybe this was a little bit of a first step for you to at least just listen to this and then have an action plan to go forward, because um, the harvest is plentiful, as we've talked about in our last couple episodes. And it's not always the FCA staff person that's going to be able to reach those athletes. It's their peers, right? It's not always the FCA staff that's going to reach all the coaches, but the coach that has a reputation that people know, that people trust, that people appreciate, how they do things. That person reaching out to the other coaches to get together, like that's where it happens, right? It's peer-to-peer relationship that's really going to do it. So again, I hope this episode was somewhat helpful for you guys, and I hope that you reach out for some more information. But until next time, until next week, I hope you guys have a great time.